Hi everyone, so my name is Genevieve and today we'll be talking about the treaty port system in Japan and its woodblock prints. So just a brief outline of what we'll be talking about today. First, we'll do a brief background on the treaty port era and system. Next, we'll move on to the Yokohama prints. Those were created during the early treaty port years. And then we'll talk about the Enlightenment prints that were created during the later treaty port years before we do a quick conclusion. So first, a bit of the background. Before the treaty port system was imposed in Japan, it had a foreign policy of national seclusion. And then this all ended when American Commodore Perry arrived in Japan in 1853 with his gunboats, and he requested that Japan open for trade with the US. So while the first Treaty of Peace and Amity in 1854 marked the official start of the treaty port system, it was really the second Treaty of Amity and Commerce in 1858 that kick-started the system in Japan. And this opened the formal ports of Yokohama, Nagasaki, Niigata, and Hyogo. And this treaty was important because it set the model for those that would follow with the other treaty nations, such as Britain, France, Russia, and the Netherlands. So the treaty port system is a form of informal imperialism or semi-colonialism, and the treaties were signed under the implied threat of force, whether real or imagined, through the use of American gunboats, or also known as gunboat diplomacy. So these treaties were unequal because first, they provided for extraterritoriality, which meant that foreigners that were present in Japan were exempt from Japanese laws. Second, there was a most favored nation clause, which meant that any concession that Japan granted to one treaty nation would be automatically granted to the others. And last, Japan was not able to set their own tariff rates to protect their own domestic economy. So the treaties were a matter of national humiliation, and once they were set, the Japanese desired to be free from these treaties. But the treaties also created a dilemma, and that was the dilemma between Japanese tradition and Western modernity. So then how was Japan to respond to the situation? And the answer was in Wakon Yosai, or Japanese Spirit Western Learning. So this was a solution that provided a balance between the two extremes of first, either completely westernizing or completely resisting. And both of these options would risk Japan losing its culture, identity, and its sovereignty. So Wakon Yosai provided a balance between the two options, and this meant that they would learn what was necessary and practical from the West and modernize, but also retain Japanese culture, spirit, and tradition. So now moving on to the Yokohama woodblock prints. So the port of Yokohama opened in 1859, so 1 year after the second Treaty of Amity and Commerce was signed. And once that treaty was signed in 1858, it rapidly transformed from a fishing village into a prominent bustling hub of international trade. So once the borders were open, the gates were open, there was an influx of foreigners from the 5 treaty nations, the US, Britain, France, Russia, and the Netherlands. And they brought with them a range of goods and services to Japan as well. And naturally, this generated curiosity and fascination among the locals. So for artists, they channeled this fascination and curiosity into the creating woodblock prints that specifically depicted the foreigners in their lands. And these prints express a very keen sense of observation, and thus this is what I consider the first phase of Wakon Yosai, observation. So now we are looking at 3 woodblock prints from a series of 8, and the series is called 8 Views of Yokohama in Bushu. So this series was originally from the Chinese art and literary theme of 8 views of the Xiao and Xiang rivers. And in the 14th century, this series was imported to Japan and adapted to Japanese landscapes such as Edo. So when we look at these 3 Yokohama prints here, they adapt the same series, the same historical and traditional series, but they substitute it with the views of the foreigners. Now, what's very different, and this is definitely visually a very stark difference and departure away from the traditional Chinese and Japanese landscapes. And instead here, the landscapes serves as more of backdrops, and the focus is really on the foreigners themselves. So the foreigners become the sights and they become the views, as in the title, that the Japanese observe. But interestingly, what is not depicted in these prints are the real problems that existed within the port, such as the economic difficulties. Despite the influx of trade, unemployment rose, domestic prices soared. That is not communicated in the prints. There we have lots of cholera. And most important, what is not shown is the tensions that existed between the Japanese, more specifically the samurai, and the foreigners. So when we take a look at the second and third prints, those that depict foreigners riding horses, this was quite significant because while such acts increase the interactions, the interpersonal interactions between Westerners and the Japanese, they also created a lot of tension because traditionally in Japan, riding horses and horse riding was a symbol of status and reserved for the samurai. So when the foreign merchants came in, when foreign women started riding horses, this disrupted the socio-cultural norm in Japan. And these acts would have angered the samurai, who were already very angry with the fact that the Tokugawa government had signed the treaties that allowed the influx of foreigners in the first place. But all this is not expressed in these prints, and it's also not expressed in the broader hundreds of Yokohama prints that were produced during the time. So in these Yokohama prints, there is, again, an intense quality of observation. And this quality of observation was present in the ukiyo-e prints, or prints of the floating world, that were popular before the treaty port system. And so for these floating world prints, the subjects of focus and the most popular subjects were kabuki theater actors and geisha. So, however, the geisha and the kabuki actors, they sort of existed in a space outside the norms of society. And although in terms of their race, they were Japanese, they were looked at as the other. So similarly, when we come back to the Yokohama prints, the foreigners now have taken the place of those kabuki actors and geishas. And at the same time, they exist in a place outside the realms of the normal Japanese society, despite their pervasiveness. They were also looked at as the other. And now here we have a photograph of an intense study of the samurai. So paralleling Japan's fascination with the West in Yokohama was Western fascination with the Japanese. And so Western photographers would photograph the local samurai, for example, such as in this intense study, and they too would capture what was very distinct from their old culture. So just as the Japanese were capturing what they believed to be novel in terms of the foreigners, such as the manner of Western dress, their uniforms, as well as the interactions between men and women and the chivalrous behavior between men and women that really inspires them. The Westerners too were also observing the Japanese. Okay, now we move on to the next phase, the Enlightenment prints. So when the Tokugawa shogunate was overthrown in 1868, this brought in a new era in Japan, the Meiji period. And this created a new kind of print called the Enlightenment prints. And its name came from a new slogan that ran parallel with Walk on Your Side, which meant civilization enlightenment. So now in these prints, they no longer depict foreigners, and instead they focus on Japan's modernity. So this ideological shift is represented in what is depicted as well, and it represents a focus towards Japan's developing modernization. And this is what I believe to be the second phase of Walk on Your Side. So now you have this Meiji era Kaika print, and it depicts the emperor, his son, and the empress. And they're all dressed in very fashionable Western dress, military uniforms, and including their hairstyles are Western. But we also have a reminder of that observation period through the books in the center that represent learning and progress. So the emperor was a very key symbol in Japan's modernization or its quest for modernization. So depicting him here as well as along with his family was very important in promoting this idea of a nuclear family. And together they are a model for everyone to follow in terms of the road to westernization and modernization. But at the same time, despite the very overly Western dress, elements of tradition and culture and Japanese culture still remain. In the background, although it's quite difficult to see, there are depictions of plums, pine trees, and cranes. And these three are known as the three friends of winter, which are symbolic of traditional Confucian virtues such as resilience, strength, and modesty. And so by depicting the imperial family in the Western appearance, but at the same time backdropping that with Japanese tradition, we have an encapsulation of the new goals of the Meiji era, but at the same time the coexistence with Japanese tradition. And again, we see an ongoing parallel. So while the Japanese were taking out Western dress and emulating and promoting modernization, Western artists and European artists too were very inspired by Japanese culture. And this is exemplified here by this portrait of the woman dressed in the blue kimono holding an uchiwa fan, flat fan. So to conclude, just a very quick conclusion, the treaty port system and Japan's contact with the West was not just geopolitical. It was a convergence of completely distinct and different cultures and of distinct systems of meaning. And so Walk on Your Side as a model, as a solution, as a pathway provided Japan a way of navigating and understanding that cultural conflict and contact. And so for the wood block prints, they indeed created a very specific and deliberate image of foreigners, where we see the omission of reality, of more negative aspects of reality, and also of modernizing Japan, where the imperial family was used to promulgate that modernization. But they still visually represent, even though they include and exclude certain elements, they visually represent the process of Walk on Your Side through through eras of Japanese history. And overall, they express the shifting attitudes towards the West, westernization, modernization, and the changing socio-cultural landscapes of Japan through the Edo and the Meiji eras. Thank you.
Thank you. Fascinating. I wish we had another couple hours. So next, Wang Haiyan is a doctor of history, researcher, and director of the Guangdong Folk Craft Museum and a council member of the Chinese Museum Association. Dr. Huang was an intern at the National Maritime Museum, Greenwich, from 2008 to 9. In recent years, she has been invited to give academic lectures and attend international academic conferences at the University of Michigan in the United States, at National Maritime Museum Greenwich, the Hong Kong Maritime Museum, as well as domestic universities and museums. So today, Dr. Wang will be talking about Golden Age Canton export arts and crafts in the 18th and 19th century.
谢谢大家，我快速的讲一下，这个题目呢是想，跟大家分享18到19世纪，在广州的外销工艺。我认为那个时候呢，是外销工艺的一个黄金时期。我们都知道，就是从汉代到清代，广州在古代海上交通和海上贸易上面，有非常重要的地位，尤其是在1757到1840年，就是广州一口通商啊，成为这个世界贸易体系的一个很重要的城市。那么我们其实因为广州的这个重要的在交通和贸易的地位，那么我们其实在国外的很多博物馆都能够看到，有很多广州生产的工艺精品啊。这个呢是我在很多年前在 V&A Museum 看到的来自广州的工艺品。我们看到这个有墙纸，有这个珐琅碟，还有后面的这些像象牙制品，这个都是广州生产。那么我们再反过来再看广州的这个工艺的生产，它的历史的溯源，那么我们可以看到，就是我主要这里的溯源从清代开始，其实到了清代呢，就是随着这个贸易的进一步发展，在广州城内呢已经是有很丰富的就是工艺品的销售，然后有很多的店铺。我们在一些的历史文献，包括外国人的游记能够看到，就是比如说有专门制作象牙的象牙街，然后13行商管区附近呢，就是有专属的一些工艺品销售工艺品的店铺，比如说专门就还原一街专门卖这个外销画的，然后像同文街和靖远街就是卖广彩瓷器的，这些呢，他们其实都是我们叫前店后厂，就是前面销售后面生产这样的一种形式。这个呢是1854年有一位叫John Glasgow 的一位美国人，他美国传教士他列出来的，他在一本广州指南里边列出来的各条街销售的商品。那么这个是我们在这个有一本就是中华帝国的一个铜版画上面，我们看到这个13行附近专门做就是外国人生意销售外销工艺品的店铺。那么就是刚才我们就已经知道，就是很多外销品现在已经是成行成市了。那么我们再来观察这些成行成市的商品的时候，我们发现其实手工艺的行业呢，已经就是新的行业已经产生。而这个时候的背景呢，就是中国由一个传统以进口贸易为主的国家转变为以出口贸易为主的国家，而且呢，这个贸易的形式呢，就是也由原来的以漕购贸易为主的这种市舶贸易，转变为就是以西方商人为主的洋舶贸易。那么这个呢，就是清代的明清时期的广州的广州城的地图。那么我们可以看到呢，就是这一条呢，就是广州的一条护城河，叫玉带壕。那么这个是广州的城墙，然后在这个蓝城附近，就是靠近这个玉带壕的这一带就有很多的店铺，就是刚才我提到的那些象牙做象牙的象牙街什么的都是在这里。那么沿着这一条支就是一条冲吧，我们叫应该是六脉渠的其中一条，然后它是跟这个玉带壕连接起来。那么沿着这个玉带壕出来经过这个 西濠就可以跟珠江联系在一起，所以呢，也就是说呢，其实我们从这个，从刚才这幅图呢，就可以发现，其实在这个，跟珠江相连的这个玉带濠旁边呢，就成为了当时华南地区一个很繁华的一个经济中心，就是有很多的，这个归德门也是我刚才想。就是这个就是归德门，就是在这个归德门内，就有很多这样的街，成行成市，而且它的街名都是反映了他们销售的商品的名字。那么依赖这一条濠，然后呢，就是在这条濠旁边呢有一条街叫濠畔街，就成为了当时在广州非常繁华的一个地方啊。这里屈大均曾经说过，他是说它的繁华程度是过于秦淮数倍，就是比南京的秦淮河边还要繁华，而且他们销售的大量都是受外国人欢迎的，像丝绸、瓷器、茶叶，然后各种的外销的工艺品。那么我就想把这些外销的工艺品分了几个类别来介绍一下，其中一个是广做的家具。广做家具很多也是在玉带濠旁边，因为我们知道木料很重，所以它肯定要在河边它的运输会更加的方便，所以在玉带濠旁边呢就有很多的家具的做法。然后这个呢是专门做给外国人选择的，就是这一本就有点像类似那个 catalog 一样的，就是让外国人可以选择来订货的一本册子。然后这些家具呢，我们都能看到它其实是有西方家具的元素在里边，但是他们是广州做的。那么除了家具之外，就是广州的织绣业。我们知道广州的生丝和丝品是很受欧洲欢迎的，那么出口的量也很大。然后在这个在这些出口的生丝里边呢，有很多呢，有50%就是占了一半是由这个广东生产的啊，这是那个 MOS 的一个统计就是随着这个广州生丝生产的发达，就是改变了原来以无丝为主的一种局面。然后呢，因为生丝的发达，所以呢也产生了一个新的行业，是丝织行业。然后他们也有自己的行业会馆叫锦纶会馆。然后从锦纶会馆碑刻的记载呢，就可以看到当时在广州西关的从事丝织业的店家其实有数百家，然后工人有3-4万人都是从事这个丝织业的。然后他们还把这个就是这个丝织业的这个产业的组织也很丰富，而且组成了很多个不同的行。其中呢就是这里头提到的这个洋货行，就是专门做外销生意的，然后包括这个洋八五六丝、洋货、洋金等等。然后这些呢，他也做进口的生意，就比如说来自越南和印度的。那么除了这个丝织业的发达之外呢，对不起，就是广绣业也出现了，也非常的就是非常的受欢迎。那个时候呢，就是提到了，就是很多的人做这个就是从事刺绣类的人，他们其实就一个人就可以养家活口，然后产品很欢迎的。那么最多的时候呢，在广州的绣庄呢有50多家。集中呢就是在状元坊一带，然后从事这个刺绣的最好的工匠都是男的，他们叫花老，然后专门做这一行的花老就有3000多人，那么加上女工的话就应该超过1万人。那么 第三个就是我想介绍的就是广彩瓷。那么大家应该对广彩更加熟悉，其实广彩就是专门为外销而产生的，就是他们提到就是从景德镇买瓷胎，然后到广州加工为这个瓷器，然后再出口。那么这个大家也很清楚，就是很多就是从康熙、雍正年间就开始出现这个广彩的生产和销售。那么早期的广彩没有自己特别的特点，它还是跟粉彩，就是景德镇出的粉彩，比较类似，粉彩和珐琅彩比较类似。但是到了乾隆、嘉庆以后呢，就广彩开始形成了自己的特点。那么这个是乾隆年间的，就是很多还是跟它的金和它的其他的用色其实跟现在还不太一样，但是呢，到了但是在乾隆年间，但是它还是蓝样加工的，就是比如说像这种文章瓷，这个像英国东印度公司的徽章纹这样子，然后而且呢，他们的形制呢很多都是西方家庭比较常用的一些日用品的形式。但是呢，到了晚清呢，广彩开始发达起来，除了就是有自己的行会、灵司堂，然后从事的人数有3000多人之外呢，它也从没有固定的纹饰到了可以批量生产，就出现了一些很固定的一些纹饰，比如说这个是受美国市场欢迎的，叫伞花雀，还有就是像这个也是美国市场欢迎的这个叫菲茨修的八宝蝶，然后这个是受法国殖民地欢迎的这种斗鸡图案等等，就是已经形成了固定的纹饰，可以进行批量的生产。那么除了广彩之外呢，还有就是各种各样的扇子也非常多。我们知道那个时候呢，很多的扇子在一开始呢，主要是以象牙为主，而且被外国人认为是非常珍贵的礼品。那么这种象牙扇子的出现，也跟广州的象牙贸易的发达有关系。那这里就不详细说，就因为象牙贸易最初呢是从16世纪开始，然后最后是在广州成为了一个象牙的集散地和一个很重要的象牙制作中心。那么这个呢是当时的就是这个 What's in the City of Canton 的这本书里边，这个 Gray 就介绍了他所看到的做扇子的店铺，然后这个是当时的卖扇子的，然后呢就出现了各种各样材质的扇子。我简单介绍一下，就像比如说这个是全象牙的扇子，他们叫 Grace。后来呢又出现了不同的材质，比如说像这种银鎏金的折扇，还有这个玳瑁的折扇，漆扇，然后就是后来就变成了纸扇或者是绢扇，就是除了随着这个象牙越来越贵慢慢就出现了各种的材质，然后包括像这一种叫这个sample frame， 就是用于给这个人来订货的时候选择用不同的材质，因为它的扇骨都是由不同的材质组成的。然后上面还有各种的，就是方便他们就是特制的不同的他们的那个名字和徽章这个呢也能看到一些13行的图案和纹饰。那么我就认为呢，在上面呢可以看到中西文化的交流。一个呢就是有专门从事这个商品销售的店铺，像这个窝笼。然后呢还有就是然后就是还有它用的不同的就是扇面是纸质的，是英国制造，然后扇骨是来自于广州这一把就是然后就是上面有很多的有西方人的人物形象，然后再加上广州的做的一个扇面结合在一起对，所以我认为呢，这个是 各种的文化交集在一起，成就了当时的黄金时代。谢谢。
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow participants of Forum for Asia-Pacific Maritime Culture. Let me introduce myself. My name is Firman Faturman. I'm a researcher the Indonesian Community of Historical Enthusiasts or Komunitas Rempat in Indonesia, and also a curator at the Jakarta Maritime Museum, Museum Bahari in Jakarta, Indonesia. Okay, today I will be talking about the Jakarta port as a gateway, meeting point of culture and maritime communities in Jakarta. So, Jakarta has long been recognized as one of the key maritime hubs in Southeast Asia and the wider Asia-Pacific region. So, its port function not only as a site for loading, unloading goods, but also as space of intercultural interaction. Here, local coastal communities of Java, immigrant for various Indonesian islands, and international groups have come together. This process has shaped Jakarta's cosmopolitan cultural identity, deeply rooted in maritime activity. Based on this condition, the port can be understood as a contact zone, a meeting space for diverse cultural groups as they influence each other and even create a new identity. So this research is built by three main questions, because how has Jakarta port functioned as a meeting point of culture and maritime community? Which maritime communities can be identified in Jakarta? How has modernization influenced the maritime tradition and hotel sustainability in the city? So, to answer this question, I use maritime history and maritime culture approach method include archival research, interview, and flight observation through the main research site are Sunda Kelapa Port as traditional port and Tanjung Priok as a modern port. In addition, I observed the surrounding areas where maritime culture communities are located. By combining archival resource, material artifact, and oral tradition, I aim to capture the dynamic of Jakarta's maritime society more comprehensively. Yeah, this is the historic port of Indonesia. We have many historic ports of Indonesia because Indonesia is archipelago state in many islands of Indonesia, and it's located Sunda Kelapa and Tanjung Priok Port in Jakarta in the Java Island. If we zoom, this is a map of Jakarta, and this is Sunda Kelapa, and this is Tanjung Priok. Okay, Sunda Kelapa is one of the oldest ports in Indonesia. It might have been active since the 12th century. It was here that fishermen, traders from across the archipelago and foreign merchants interacted. There remains POC warehouse, traditional finishing boats, and coastal coasts are tangible material culture that still exists today. So the Tanjung Priok port is unlike Sunda Kelapa. Tanjung Priok was constructed in the late 19th century as a modern port integrated during the Dutch colonial period. it become a major hub not only for export-import activities, but for also passenger shipping. In the years following Indonesian independence and through the reform era, the port continued to attract massive migration flow from across the island of Indonesia, such as Bugis, Makassar, Mandar, Palawan, Maluku, and Papua. Today, Tanjung Priok serves multiple functions as a passenger port, container port, and naval base. This is the old painting in 1662 by Andreas Brickman. And if we zoom and focus, we're gonna see many culture over here. The activity, woman and sons, so procession soldier over here. And this is the canal, and yeah, this is the Kelapa port. So people from various region, if you see in this like Chinese people, this is the European people, and this is Arabian people, this is Chinese people, many people in Sunda Kelapa. And Tanjung Priok Port, this is the map of Port Tanjung Priok. Yeah, this is the first function. Passenger port, the second function for container port for import, and yeah, now for naval base for Navy, for military port. So this is based on my research. I identified three main categories of communities in Jakarta. The first is local coastal community. That's the first in the coastal area. This is Oh yeah, and Jakarta not only about the mainland, we have many small islands in the north of Jakarta. That's part of Jakarta. We call this the orang pulau communities. Just condition. Yeah, the local coastal communities of North Jakarta originating from various regions in Indonesia, such as Bugis and Makassar from Sulawesi Island, Indramayu, Cirebon, and Madura from Java Island. Their tradition remain costly kind of fishing and sea rituals. Is the condition. Okay. And the second, the migrant communities from the outside archipelago, such as Chinese community in the Pecinan, we say the Kelodok Pecinan, Pancoran. So from Arabian communities in Pakojan, this is Arab settlement area. And the Portuguese communities in Kampung Tugu, their legacy are still visible until now in Jakarta. And this is the Orang Pulau community. Orang Pulau in the Thousand Island of Kepulauan Seribu. These fishing communities often originally from different parts of Indonesia settled in the island. They maintaining deep local knowledge about the sea currents and coastal ecology, and occasionally travel to ports in Jakarta. And this is the condition. I captured one of island from Thousand Island in Jakarta. This is the cultural acculturation. Interaction among communities have the first visible acculturation, like language, foods, so ritual, kinship. Language, Betawi language, especially in coastal area, absorbed by many words from Portuguese, Arabic, and Chinese. So for foods like lontong cap gomez, soto Betawi, nasi kebuli, and dodol Betawi, kue mangkok, sayur babanci, and anything. So ritual like selling prayers, compliments, and tradition. So kinship, like mutual cooperation, patron clients, and trade network. Yeah, this is for example. This is dodol, Betawi dodols, influenced by Chinese culture. Is the spell Nian Gao or Dream Cow. Maybe you're from China is familiar. So Betawi cupcakes influenced by Chinese culture named Fang Gao. So this is babanci vegetable, like a soup, influenced by Arabic or Middle East culture with use strong spices. And this is the ritual processing we call sedekah or the offering, as known Nadran, Pantai Laut in Jakarta Bay. This is a traditional fishing community from Bugis, Indramayu, Cirebon. He believed when he take us more from a sea, he give from sea again, like this. Yeah, he give they give some food and anything to the sea.
Fish.
Yes, so this is the challenge. However, this maritime fund is face significant challenge. The port modernization, coastal reclamation, and urban expansion have increasingly marginalized their living space. So the Orang Pulau in the Thousand Island, for example, face cultural identity challenges such as Betawianization. Betawi is an ethnic group in mainland area. So with pressure them adopt Betawi culture from mainland area. Yeah, so because Orang Pulau have the real identity, maritime identity is a different with Jakarta mainland. Yeah. Okay. This is the conclusion. From this research, we can conclude Jakarta Port is not only a logistical hub, but also the cultural and socio-historical node. The three key communities in maritime Jakarta, local coastal group, migrant group from outside Indonesia, and Orang Pulau together shape Jakarta maritime identity. And the third, cultural acculturation demonstrate the relation and creativity of maritime community amid modernization. The recommendations to preserve maritime traditions such as fisherman knowledge, sailing rituals, and culinary heritage. So develop a community-based maritime education and cultural tourism, encourage continuous documentation and research, including oral history. So build the collaboration among government, academia, and local communities, and raise a public awareness of the importance of maritime cultural heritage. So today, 20 September, we are in Indonesia, celebrate Indonesian National Maritime Day. So this is a quote from our first president, return to being a maritime nation. Yeah. The Jakarta Port is a living cultural gateway to maritime heritage of the Asia-Pacific that must preserve together. Thank you.
Sen Langling, or Lillian, I guess as you prefer, is the Deputy Director and Research Fellow of the Guangzhou Museum. She has dedicated 2 decades to the collection of Chinese export art and research on Guangzhou's urban history. She has curated a series of original exhibitions exploring the city's historical legacy and authored Porcelain Stories, Chinese Export Ware Connecting China with the World, while co-authoring Craftsmen of Guangzhou, an Illustrated History, I believe you're giving your talk in Chinese, correct? So, but thank you so much. And I know we're pressed for time, so I don't know if we have time for questions, but we'll see how we go. We have 15 more minutes before lunch, and it's very compressed. But welcome, and looking forward to your talk.
And I think you can hear me clearly, so I don't use the microphone to make it.
We are recording.
Sorry. It's my honor to attend this funeral on behalf of Guangzhou Museum. But sorry, I have to make it in Chinese. This is my topic. 时光倒流回22年前，广州呢曾经举办了一个在2003年，广州曾经举办了一个意义深远的展览，名为《18至19世纪羊城风物》，英国维多利亚阿伯特博物院场广州外销画展。那么主办方同时举办了一场学术研讨会，来自中山大学的刘志伟教授，有一个著名的讲座叫做《在域外寻找广州》。那么刘教授所指的域外呢，是指地理大发现以后，西方航海国家与广州进行的海上贸易历史。那么这段早期全球化贸易的历史，在西方被称为中国贸易时期 （China Chain），但是呢，我们在中方的文献当中鲜有记载，是大部分人并不熟知的域外。因此，刘教授在当时呼吁大家要到域外寻找这一时期与广州历史相关的各种资料。那么外销画只是其中之一。刘教授认为，这个域外的广州的域外有着独特的活力，是最多元、最开放的广州。也是最值得今天广州人民珍惜的文化遗产。当时在场的学者和博物馆工作人员从中了解到广州还有这样一段的历史，开始关注和寻找清代广州外销艺术品。那么第一部分我想跟大家分享的是，这20年来广州博物馆对外销艺术品的这个征集过程。那么从1999年英国约克郡的伊凡·威廉斯先生捐赠60幅通草水彩画，到今天我们博物馆已经形成了年代系列完整、材质丰富、器型多样、工艺鲜明的外销艺术品品类，其中以18、19世纪的通草水彩画、广州彩瓷、文章瓷、马尼拉披肩最具规模和特色。那么征集的方式呢，包括就是捐赠和购买，来源既有研究的学者、私人藏家，也有文物商店和古董公司，当中有一些非常重要的人物和事件，促成了大批藏品的回流和入场。这个是1999年伊凡·威廉斯先生捐赠通草水彩画，并在当时举办的第一个展览《西方人眼里的中国情调》，这也是中国大陆公立博物馆首次入场外销通草水彩画。这是刚才在开篇我提到的2003年，我们广州博物馆、广州艺术博物院、中山大学还有 V&A 我们同时举办的一个展览。这个展览呢，当时展出了 V&A 收藏的广州外销画有200多幅，并出版了同名的展览图录。这个是2006年瑞典哥德堡号仿古商船访华抵达广州，当时中瑞两国携手在我们博物馆举办了中瑞陶瓷贸易仪征，瑞典国王卡尔16世也出席了开幕仪式。在2年后呢，我们再次与瑞典的好像又不行，不行，是不是要系统？或者用手機西網錄唔到。不好意思 ，sorry。幫你等一等。OK，就咁啦，繼續。 那么这是2年后我们举办的另一个展览，诗歌的宝号带我到广州。这是当时的策展团队的合影。通过这2次的展览呢，我们一共向瑞典西方古董公司征集了广彩、本彩、青花瓷的瓷器将近600多件。那么这个是2013年到2016年，我们与英国的文章瓷专家 David Harvard 还有他的遗孀 Angela 征集了近1000件的外销文章瓷。并且在2015年底举办了广州定制广州博物馆展新代外销文章瓷，同时我们也邀请了 Angela 来广州做学术的演讲。这是当时的吕穗梅馆长接受 Angela 捐赠的铜版画。在2016年到2023年，我们分批向美籍华人梁学培、于翠燕女士征集了外销的丝织品。今天沙比老师也来了现场。非常感谢他们的捐赠，他们一共捐赠了超过600件的这个丝织品，其中包括马尼拉披肩、服饰挂件等等。那么就是在这个过程中呢，萨米老师也不断的分享了海外的这个收藏的中国外销服饰的资料。这些藏品年代系列完整，工艺精湛，具有中国的传统纹饰，也有外销丝织品的特征。那么至今呢，我们博物馆收藏的这个各类外销艺术品已经超过了3000件，包括外销画、广彩、牙雕、银器、漆器和丝织品等等。那么这些类别涉及的工艺品，涉及的工艺包括了绘画、蕾丝、镀金、蘸胎、刺绣、画珐琅等等，可以说是代表了广州口岸最具代表以及在中国乃至世界具有较高水平的各种技艺，同时也较广泛的反映了17世纪以来中国与世界各国进行的贸易以及当时流行的一些风尚和艺术情趣。那么第2部分想跟大家分享的就是从这个外销艺术品的收藏，我们怎么样去进一步的了解广州口岸它的港口和贸易网络。首先，这些藏品的回流给我们提出了很多问题。这些商品它是怎样生产出来的？它的订购者和生产者是谁？它是怎样被运到了海外市场？又经历了怎样的使用过程？刚开始我们是无从下手的，因为在中文的材料里面几乎找不到一点记载。但是很庆幸的是，在海外征集的过程中，我们跟西方博物馆和研究人员，包括古董公司、私人藏家充分的沟通。我们在这个过程中，也不断的收集相关的资料。我们了解到，随着地理大发现以后，西方航海国家到达了南海海域，逐渐形成了中国贸易网络。在全球化背景下，广州体制的确立与一海关的管理模式。具体推荐大家了解这2本书，分别是梁家斌先生的《广东13堂考》，以及范代克先生的《广州贸易：中国沿海的生活和事业》。随着这个依赖季风和洋流航行的帆船，将遍布东西航线上的各个港口都连接成了纵横交错的这个贸易网络。那么在这个网络里面呢，广州是非常重要的一环。我们可以说，在18、19世纪，它已经一路成为了欧美国家与中国进行海上贸易的唯一港口。在这个背景下出现的外销艺术品，它们的生产销售都以广州为重要基地，又或者经过腹地转移到广州加工生产制作，再外销到海外。那么与此同时，我们还要关注外销商品它的原材料和海外市场。例如象牙、犀角贵重的木材是由东南亚运到广州的，那么丝头、茶叶和瓷胎是从它的供应地江浙、福建和江西等地。这样我们便将广州与原产地的原材料的供应地、商品的腹地以及顾客所在的海外市场连接起来。除了以上谈到的巨大的贸易网络，我们还应该关注广州口岸这一些特殊的空间，例如连接了珠江口和13航商管区的一个珠江前航道，这里面有莲花塔、翅膀塔和琶洲塔以及黄埔锚地。另外就是贸易进程结束以后，外国商人从商管区去往澳门的珠江后航道，当时来华的很多商人都留下了游记和绘画。另外还有新旧中国街上的各种商店、店铺，刚才黄管已经提到了。还有就是1840年前后每个月的初8、18和28，商人可以到访的花地、商花园和海状寺，以及1840年以后进入城内他们看到的各种建筑、港口风光以及这种城市生活。 那么这些景象呢，都被留存在外销艺术品的这个画面当中，包括在漆和折扇和屏风、绣品等等，还有各种各样的这个各国的语言的记载。正是在这样一个立体的时空中，人与人的接触和碰撞交流中，才造就了一件件带有时代意义的外销艺术品。那么这个地图呢，是我们的同事在其中一次展览当中，根据西方人游记的记载，他画出来的19世纪就是西方人到广州有一个2日游的路线。如果大家有机会再去广州，可以沿着这个路线再走一次。那么通过这些图像分析，我们也可以了解到，广州其实在18、19世纪的外销就是整个中国贸易的时期，它的作用是非常重要的。那么可以说它是中华大地的风气之先的拿中庄，这是蔡永春先生的一个概括。那么我们可以看到，在这个过程中，我们形成了各种各样的外销艺术品，因此我们来看待这些当年留下来的商品，它其实是非常重要的一个历史资料。那么第3部分想要跟大家分享的就是在外销艺术品的生产过程中，我们最重要的一些人物。首先我们整个20多年的征集过程，其实是前10年我们关注的是外销艺术品的类别、材质、年代和器型国别。但是在2010年以后，我们更多的关注是工艺溯源、图像比较、风格变迁，进而考察人背后的这个人员流动以及这个技术传播、文化交流。大量的这个资料证明，文化传播和交流是双向互动的。那么中国外销商品在欧美传播了中国文化，也掀起了中国风。同时，西方的技艺和审美也传到了广州，经广州传到中国。比如意大利的白加白工艺、法国的洛可可风格、德国麦森瓷器的港口图、欧洲的字中以及图画、玻璃画、仿彩等等。可以说，欧洲流行的设计图样和风格，都以无法想象的快速反映到广州的外销艺术品当中，体现了广州口岸与海外市场的紧密互动。那么从这个角度来说，外销艺术品它是中国制造，但是离不开西方的设计。那么这里面我们要特别关注的就是曾经在广州城活跃的各种各样的人，他们包括粤海关的监督、外商、行商、市宰、使节以及随团的画家、大班、船员、工匠等等。那么刘志伟教授提出，在18、19世纪，在广州城活跃的各种工匠以及外国人打交道的本地人，最少已经超过了25000人。刚才黄管讲的是，其中丝织品就超过了1万人。那么在非常感谢一些学者的这个研究成果，比如就是2018年中山大学蔡永春先生出版的这个《广州海事录》，还有2019年《广州匠图志》，2021年香港城市大学的陈美宝教授出版了《遇见华东：18、19世纪欧洲就是珠江口的小人物和大世界》。那么在2024年，广州海事博物馆与英国的象泉园林博物馆主办的这个展览，让大家更加关注普通人群的历史。同时呢，我们也关注广州与国内市场的这个互动，包括就是跟苏州，我们跟苏州博物馆办的一个展览。2019年，我们跟黄馆还有这个故宫博物院和颐和园管理处在同时举办了这个匠心神巧，可以说是我们近20年外销艺术品征集的一个总结性的展览。这个是近些年我们举办的一些展览的海报。最后是对未来的展望。经过近20年的追寻，我们发现相关的历史资料是无穷无尽的，对广州的认识也不断的被刷新和丰富。这个过程充满了惊喜和趣味。那么广州始终是开放和包容的，充满了生机和活力。也像今天大会的主旨发言提出到，它其实是连接了过去和未来。那么我们可喜的看到，近些年围绕着外销艺术品的收藏和研究，在中国形成了多个研究的重镇，也呈现了多学科、多主题和多国别合作研究的良好态势。相信未来我们将会发现更多关于广州的故事。那么通过我们这个在域外发现广州的这个历程，我们更加明确外销艺术品的征集，它是可以不断的丰富我们对城市历史的研究。我们也要将物和人的研究结合，重新审视广州历史发展的诸多细节和发展的走向，及其在中国乃至世界历史上的一个地位和作用。我的报告到此结束，非常感谢 HKMM、CMM 和 ICMM。
All right, well, thank you very much to our speakers. That was fascinating. And please take advantage of listening to the recordings later with translator apps if you're not able to follow the languages. But thank you very, very much. I'm very honored to be here. And I love the perspective that all of you brought to the importance of these port cities as convergence, as portals for cultural exchange in positive and negative ways. And I wish we had a lot more time to sit and speak more. I assume that we can ask questions through LinkedIn or some other vehicle after these recordings have come out. And please also get cards from each other. And I'd love to actually connect with all of you. I have questions. But I know we have a very short time, so lunch is now, apparently, for half an hour upstairs.
Yes, please follow me to the front
All right, thank you very much. That was excellent. All right, take care.